Hey again. I posted that video on my favorite books this morning, but someone commented me and asked me what authors I wouldn't recommend, and I thought that might make a good subject for a companion video to that first one. But I really want to get away from posting things that are very negative, things that detract from materials that other people have found valuable, simply because I don't feel like it's my place to do that. So rather than talk about specific authors that I don't recommend, I'm instead going to talk about things that I look for in books that serve as red flags for me when I'm trying to decide whether or not a book might be worth reading. The first thing that I look for is what the author has to say about Wicca's history. Sometimes there's a chapter, but frequently this material is right up front in the introduction or in the first chapter. Sometimes you can even get an idea about what the author has to say by reading the back of the book. And if the author's history is false, then I avoid the book. If the author is perpetuating Margaret Murray's ideas about the witch cult in Britain and how Wicca is this ancient pre-Christian religion that spanned Europe and we're just reviving it now. If those ideas are present in the book, then I avoid it. Just because with so much material that's so readily available on Wicca's history, there's no reason to be spouting Margaret Murray. Her views, and consequently Gardner's views, and many of Wicca's other founders, many of their views which were based on Murray's, those were all very important and they were very, very influential. And they still hold sway for a lot of people, and I think that's important and that's something that we should be aware of. But it's not how we should approach Wicca now. Again, simply because more concrete information is so readily available. The second thing I look for is the author's approach to the divine. If they approach deities as these abstract things that we call into play during ritual when we want something, then I avoid the book. Just because my experiences with the divine have been very, very different, and I understand that everyone is going to have a different point of view here, but my experience with deity and worshipping my gods has been that they're very real, they're very, they're tangible in a lot of ways. I don't understand the idea that gods are just these things that we use when we want something. The idea that, okay, I'm doing a spell about blah, and I'm going to do it then, and what deity do I need? Who should I use? That idea, I think it's very shallow. And maybe it works for some people, and that's fine. But to me, Wicca is all about the worship of the gods, first and foremost. And if that's not first and foremost for the author, then I can see that it's not something that's going to be very valuable for my personal practice. You might be different, and that's fine. But that's just me. The third thing is the read. If the book doesn't have a very clear section about Wiccan ethics, then I avoid it, just because ethics is a very difficult subject, and it's one that a lot of authors avoid. And I don't even know that they do it consciously, just because a lot of Wiccans don't talk about ethics in depth. We sort of, we say something vague about harming none, and it doesn't get much deeper than that, which is a shame. If the author prints Gwen Thompson's poem without citing it, I have a problem. A lot of people do that. If you don't know who Gwen Thompson is, you should look it up. So if the read is printed somewhere and it's just superficially addressed, then it's something I avoid, because like the gods, ethics are very important in a religious philosophy, and if that's not portrayed fairly, then I wonder what else in the book is just skimmed over. And I know that it's not going to be something that's going to be worth a lot of my time. The fourth thing, and it's sort of a general thing, is just the tone of the book, which again can be gleaned from usually just by skimming the first chapter. If the author portrays Wicca superficially at all, or if it comes across that Wicca is just this benign sort of nature-loving religion that doesn't really have any depth to it, and magic is always spelled with a K, and chapter 2 is on spells and finding your totem animal or something, then I avoid the book, just because to me that's not what Wicca is about. And if I were writing a book, which I'm not, I don't think I'd mention totem animals at all, but I certainly wouldn't be talking about spells and magic right up front, just because it's such a small part of the religion to me. So those are the things that I look for and avoid when I'm looking at new books. I told you I didn't want to say anything specific about particular authors, just because I don't want to be really negative in any of the videos that I post. I think that if you're intelligent and discerning, which all of you are, then you should be able to read whatever you can get a hold of and pick out what's valuable and what's not. I don't think you should go by anyone's recommendations solely. I don't think that someone should just tell you not to read a book and that should be it for you. Plus, it would be hypocritical of me, because a lot of the authors that people speak badly of now are authors that I read when I was 13 and 14. They're the first authors that I read at all. And I feel like if I can, at 14, sit down and read Teen Witch and turn out Tradcraft, then it's probably not as big a deal as everyone says it is. That's not to say that I necessarily agree with everything that Silver Ravenwolf says, or DJ Conway, or anyone else that a lot of people recommend. But I would be a hypocrite if I sat here and told you, don't read author X because their books are bad, when they were some of the first books that I ever read on Wicca. And I feel like I turned out okay. So, that's my short video on books and authors that I don't recommend, without actually stating any authors that I don't recommend. I really encourage you to read whatever you can get a hold of. I think that's the best way to learn. And approach it the same way you would anything. Be aware of all ideas and be intelligent about analyzing them and deciding what speaks to you and what works for you and what's historically valid, etc. You can do all of that. So, go forth and read. See you next time.